1st of February, and we're out here in the sun.
Yeah.
Obviously, we got to feed the cows, but usually the 1st of February is mud and probably some snow and a little bit of rain. And with any luck, we'll get some rain. But
yeah, it was raining last night a little bit. Hopefully, we get a lot more rain this year.
Sure. Well, things are looking, pretty good for sort of this valley for this year, the storage in the mountains that we don't get any benefit of on this ranch. And looking to the top of the hill right here, we can see some snow, but see the ridge tops too.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had less precip than normal. Prediction is with El Nino that we'll get maybe a little above normal from this point out, but the ranch in general is good just from so much carryover moisture. The creek's been running since November, and the meadows are wet.
Yeah.
Maybe where some of the cows are, it might be a little too wet, but they're still out there grazing, which is amazing. Generally, we try to graze till the 1st of January, and they've been out there for the whole month of January now, and we still have a few more days, maybe even a week or two more stockpile grass for the cows to be eating out there. So that doesn't, of course, include these.
So how many cattle are on the property in total right now?
Oh boy, I don't know. I'll just throw out a round figure like 80 or 90, something like that. Our cows, some of Andrew's cows, the weaned calves, some calves that we can hear bawling in the back with the sheep that are being weaned, but something like that. And so the ones behind us that we're feeding are the weaned calves, along with cows who we're keeping close to their calves in the corral. So, and the ones that are out on grass include the cows who we weaned their calves a couple months ago, along with the finishing steers.
And then when is it that the bulls are coming? Because you got 2 new bulls, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they should be here mid-month this February, and then there's a breeding bull here in this group behind us, along with a couple of juvenile bulls. All those bulls will be segregated about the time that those come in from Nebraska. They'll be in their own bull pasture until we use them in July.
Okay. Yeah, breeding is July, the weekend of 4th of July, right?
No, the weekend of the county fair.
Weekend of the county
fair. So that's like the 3rd weekend of the month in general. We don't, it's usually around the 20th or so of July, which generates calves starting on the 1st of May.
Okay.
At least according to the chart. There's sort of the average cattle gestation, and some breeds, including Angus, can have a little bit shorter gestation period. So we'll start getting them the last week or 2 of April, but in earnest we'll start calving around the 1st of May.
And do you have a specific look that you go for when it comes to whether it's buying bulls, buying heifers?
Yeah. Well, the idea is, and I by no means consider myself especially talented cattle judge by any means. Never had any training or anything else, but we know what they ought to look like when they're finished. We want them to be moderate in their frame, so that the animals at the end are not really big. Ideally, finished steer would be 1,200 to 1,300 pounds, and again, ideally that would be at around 18 months. So we want to, we choose really more for the carcass traits and the maternal traits, and don't concentrate on the sort of the growth rate. And when we do that, we end up with a more moderate framed animal, and generally that results in the desired outcome, which is a smaller animal that would finish a little bit earlier than they might otherwise. When we first started doing this so many years ago, our cattle were a lot bigger, and we had a hard time getting them to finish at 3 years, let alone a year and a half. And so now we're able to do it consistently by 2 years, and really some of them, the best performing calves are the ones that finish around 18 months. So that's sort of the selection process, and we're turning the corner, going from black Angus to red Angus, and the red Angus can be big like some of the black Angus genetics, but in general they're going to be a little bit more moderate in size. And then the underlying reason we want to do it is that the red cattle are so much more comfortable in the heat.
Yeah.
And so cattle don't sweat, and we just think that with the lack of shade that we have generally where our pastures are, those red cattle will be more comfortable. And with that being happier, they'll perform better too. But it's really more of an animal welfare choice than performance. But we think that's for those reasons we hope that by making a switch to using red Angus bulls and keeping red calves and bringing in red Angus heifers, that over time the color of our herd will switch to primarily red. And it'd be nice if our finishing steers were all red. That'll be a while, but this is just something we started about a year ago right now, and it's a slow process if we want to breed it into them rather than wholesale the black cows out and just buy a bunch of red cows.
Yeah.
And those cows wouldn't be selected for what our needs are, and they wouldn't be raised in our environment. So it's hard to bring cattle into a new environment and expect them to be productive, for their calves to grow well, for them to have a low mortality rate and all of that. So,
and for the person watching who doesn't know a lot about cattle, there over the last, you could say, a couple decades, there's been a big push with black Angus.
Yes, absolutely.
Is there any sort of difference between black Angus and red Angus as far as meat goes, quality?
No, but there's a very true fact that there's a lot more differences between animals within a breed than there are between breeds. So within any given breed or class of animals, you can have big ones, short ones, fat ones, thin ones, fatty ones, skinny ones, all of that stuff. What's driven the popularity of black Angus specifically is the Black Angus Breed Association has been really active in doing research on their genetics, and then using the benefit of that research to select animals that perform better, maybe more marbling and so on, and then as they've been successful making the carcasses more consistent, maybe grading choice or prime more often, they've used those facts to market. And so you have certified Angus beef, which is a black Angus branded protocol, and that brings value. When you go to a restaurant and you see a certified Angus beef, provided that it's true, because not every menu tells the truth, right? But when you see that, you have reason to believe that it would be a pretty good carcass to begin with, because if they're not good carcasses, they just don't make the grade.
Yeah.
Red Angus, much smaller breed association, many fewer of them for whatever reason in the country. They have data. They maintain data sets about a bunch of that stuff, but they're, you know, probably a couple of decades behind the Black Angus folks on tabulating the data. You know, if you have smaller data sets, it's less valuable. You know, and then, you know, they can get going with the marketing, but they don't have the power of all that data behind what they would be marketing. Angus Association has. So. Hereford does a good job. You know, the Hereford Association, probably the second best, but not in the same league as the certified Angus beef.
Okay. And then you mentioned not a lot of shade on this ranch, but I believe that we've talked about planting fruit-producing trees in the future, providing shade. I would assume that would go against a traditional, you could say, old school thought process of raising cattle, because you just want as much, you could say, grasslands as possible.
Depends on how old school we're talking about. You know?
Yeah,
so
true.
People have been raising domesticated cattle a long time ago. In this country and in the West, there just is generally not a lot of shade. Where the grasslands were, a lot of those grasslands have been converted. No, the idea of silvopasture, having grass among trees or trees in, you know, along with the grass, is something that's been practiced for, you know, hundreds, if not, thousands of years for sure. We just here, this is a natural grassland and would never have been forested during, you know, European times. But adding some fruit-producing trees, and not so much like stone fruit, but some trees that generate some forage value. Maybe not so much for the cattle, although they will get in, you know, come in on the honey locust seed pods and utilize that stuff. But you know, having grass between the trees, strategically using pigs, getting the benefit of the fruit set from whatever trees, and it could be oaks, and we could have acorns. We're not talking about shading out the grass. It would be like a 25% canopy, something like that. That as the sun goes by, the grass production, according to a lot of literature, isn't reduced, and in fact, sometimes it's enhanced depending on the species of grass, because a little bit of shade helps that grass.
Yeah.
You know, when it's sitting out here at 105 degrees and, you know, just maybe a little short on water that day, that kind of thing, that grass can get set back. So the temperature regime along those pastures where we do end up with some trees, and I'd like to think right here behind us where these cattle have been fed would be part of the area where we would introduce those trees. It's just like so many other things. There's only so much time and so little resources for labor here that we've got to pick and choose. But hopefully that'll happen within, you know, maybe 5 years, something like that.
Okay, I like, the longer game vision for the ranch. And again, you've talked about bringing in beavers.
Well, we have some beavers in the creek that flows through here, and again, we can see some willows in the background. Seasonal creek that we'd like to think it'll run every year, starting in October, November, and then go through October, November the next year.
Yeah.
But we've been at this ranch for 22 years, and we've seen it flow year-round twice. So that's not, you know, that's pretty indicative. We feel really blessed that it ran year-round for 2 years. 2 different years. Usually it's dry by June in these lower reaches here in the valley. Up in the hills, it trickles, all year long. Like so many places in Northern California, our watershed has been affected by fire in the last few years. And what we've noticed is, because the conifers that burned were using so much water, we've actually noticed water coming up in the creeks. So it's staying longer even without a lot more rain, which is a pretty interesting side effect of some pretty devastating wildfires. The beavers that are here have been sort of transient. They'd be here when we had water, but then as the creek dries up, maybe the 1st of June, they don't need to have water to survive. Physiologically. But without water, they're prone to predation, including some ranch dogs and neighborhood dogs.
Yeah.
Harassing them, and whether they take them out or just scare them off. The beavers have been pretty flashy. They would be here when there's water, and busy beavers building dams and making a mess of some things. But then as it dries out, they've just sort of backed out. We hope to we're doing everything we can, aside from getting rid of our working dogs, to harbor the beavers and give them habitat. We've built a few what are called beaver dam analogs, where they're just dorky handmade structures. Take some willow branches and some brush and kind of thoughtfully try to make a little dam, and had success. The idea there is that the beavers will come behind us and they'll notice that, hey, there's a dam here, but it's leaking. And they don't like leaky dams, so they'll come in behind us and turn that beaver dam analog into an actual beaver dam. And the hope is that they'll populate the creek and the overflow channel that we have here, and bring water back to the surface by raising the water in those channels and letting the sediment fill in behind those dams. That the surface water will rise up in those creek beds over time, and restore what used to be a great big wetland meadow out here.
Yeah.
It's a wetland now because we're spreading irrigation water seasonally, but historically this was a wet meadow, and the grass grew while the sun was shining. And now there's an added component. It'll grow while the sun's shining as long as we're irrigating it.
Yeah.
And that's what these pipes are on the ground here. In the summertime we use these pipes to irrigate. Be great if we didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
And the way we hope to achieve that, maybe in my lifetime, is by letting the beavers do their thing.
Yeah.
And helping them every chance we get.
So by importing some trees, allowing the beavers to do what is instinctually natural for them, how does that help improve the quality of beef that we have?
Well, it gives us more tools to work with. I don't, the quality of the beef, the very biggest element of that is the genetics of the cattle. And even again, between animals, it's a genetic lottery.
Yeah.
Some are highly marbled, some are not. The highly marbled ones may or may not be highly tender. It's just kind of the way it goes, with genetic variation. I don't have any interest in cloning animals and trying to do unnatural things. We'll be the best stewards of the land, and animal husbandry. We'll do our best there, but we get what we get. By having water available to the meadows, to the pastures, more readily and without having to schedule irrigation and having a lot of variation in the grass, it allows us to to apply the best grazing practices. And and so really the biggest thing is the genetics. We can use the cattle and the cattle impact to improve the soil, which will improve quality and the quantity of the grass, which will allow us to do more pounds of the best meat we can per acre.
Yeah.
It's not so much a case of taking the same genetics and making better beef.
Mm-hmm.
It's how can we be more efficient
Yeah.
with the by using the best grazing practices that we can. By being selective, with the animals, of course. But
can you dive in a little bit on those grazing practices? Because I think conventional thought, you're driving through parts of California, Nevada, the west where we're at, you just see cattle just kind of spread out.
Sure.
Just kind of just
in
free
a range setting,
grazing.
that's really common, and on a irrigated pasture and inside pasture, that's also fairly common. But unfortunately, we don't have enough land to afford the luxury of putting the cattle out and then going out and checking them once in a while or harvesting them as we want. So we practice a management intensive grazing process, which involves, and during the green growing season, moving all the animals fairly often, the mama cows and their calves, especially when the calves are really young. There's a trade-off between moving them every day and letting them become accustomed to one another, letting those mothers really bond with those calves and vice versa. But in the summertime, our cows will move every 2 to 3 days generally, and then our steers, which are kept for the meat business, are moved every day. And we haven't done it religiously, but I think probably the future would be moving them twice a day during the time of year when the grass is growing the fastest, and that's May, June, July. With that, we get low harvest. If there's this much grass in the pasture, we put them in there for just a day or half a day. They're maybe only going to eat a certain amount of it. They're going to eat the best part of it, of course, but we'll put them in a small area. They'll eat that part, the top part, and then they'll really trample a lot of that into the soil, and that's really where the benefit comes from that practice, is feeding the soil bugs, the biome down there. All the microorganisms are what makes the grass grow, and it's really the key to the whole symbiotic relationship between the livestock and the and the people and the grass and the soil. Is keys to the soil. The better we are to the soil, really the better nutrient profile there will be in the meat itself, and the better nutrient profile we'll have from consuming that.
So where is the link to those grazing practices and what more people are becoming more familiar with, which is the term regenerative?
Sure. Well, I think the link is right there. It is in a pasture setting. It's absolutely the use of the animals, and unless we're moving them and practicing something approximately like I just said, we won't be positively affecting the soil. There's a point there. Let's say we move them once a week. Well, maybe that's the balancing point, and if we move them once a month, we're probably depleting our soil in an overall way, without getting into a lot of details. So if we're moving them every day, we can be confident that we're really taking out very little from the soil and adding, everything that comes out of those cattle goes into the soil and thus into the plants and back. And so the regenerative aspect of it is, how can we be on places like this particular ground we're sitting on right now is what we'll call reclaimed cropland. We didn't really grow any crops here, but the people that owned this land before us did.
Okay.
And that depleted the soil, and when we got here, this was a weed patch.
Wow.
There was no irrigation.
Yeah.
There was dedicated to it, and no interest on the part of the owners to revert it back to some sort of a pasture land.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we've done here in the last 20 plus years. But so we're regenerating an active, very active soil community here.
Mm-hmm.
But the key to that, the whole thing is, you've got to have the animals in a pasture setting to practice what would be known as regenerative ag. And you need to manage those animals in such a way that you end up with a positive effect on the soil.
Yeah.
And then everything comes, from the soil.
Yeah, I've heard a brief analogy before on, like you're saying, when there's crops and someone tills the land, the first year they till the land, you'll see birds flying in to get in the bugs, the little,
the first
the
week.
the little organisms in there,
Sure.
And then the second year might be a couple, but like the third year, there's no birds to come to eat because they've
the
just
soil's
destroyed this soil.
dead. It becomes a growing medium.
Mm-hmm.
And so with a growing medium, and you can grow in all kinds of things in a pot. They put styrofoam in a pot, and you can put water and nutrients in, and a plant will grow.
Yeah.
That's a growing medium, and that's what you end up with. And that's sort of what we inherited here.
Is that a bald eagle?
Probably. Yeah. They're in here heavy, and we love to see them, but we don't like to see them in our sheep.
Yeah, with the lambs. Yeah.
They can disappear, those lambs, right now.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. It's
No,
just
that's
it's just
okay.
great seeing the
Sure.
the biodiversity that you can have in an area.
They come in here not every year. Like last year, we had a lot of weather and so on. I don't think it had anything to do with the weather, but we just didn't see the big migration through here last year. We have seen probably more golden eagles around here this year than we normally would, and they're a lot more scarce. The bald eagles are I don't know, we've seen as many as a dozen in a day.
Okay.
Or a dozen in one place at a
Yeah.
time. So, I don't know where we were on the talk about the regenerative. Oh, you were talking about the tilling of the soil.
Yeah.
We I don't know. We do kind of a lot of things on a lot of different spots around the ranch. Where we want to be growing grain specifically as feed for our hogs, we do some tillage. We're trying to figure out a way to get to a full no-till production system there. I mean, it's done other places in the world. It's a matter of having the right equipment and, again, time and all of that stuff. But in general, we quit doing tillage about the time we got this place. Like our meadows, we've never done any tillage there. Where we grew alfalfa, we might have done some tillage, taking the alfalfa out, and so that we could go to pasture. We did that, but not exclusively. Some of the alfalfa we just interseeded into it and just let the other end of this field. Just put grass seed in and let the alfalfa be, and it's a little risky with the animals. Sometimes they'll bloat too much alfalfa.
Okay.
So it's not really preferred, at least in our part of the world. It's not great. And Argentina used to be the backbone of their grass-fed meat industry.
Okay.
Until they went to growing grain about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Now they don't have a grass-fed business anymore. Or I shouldn't say business. It's not the way Argentinian beef is grown anymore.
Mm.
They're in a feedlot, just like here.
Yeah.
So many of them.
So what else? So I guess what can you tell us about this group right behind us?
Well, this group is kind of a mixed bag.
Okay.
So half the cows in there are Andrew's cows, and half of those cows that he owns belonged to our ranch before he bought them from us. And the other half are ours. And there's, like I said, there's a couple of juvenile bulls in there, and a couple of grass-fed steers that got loose, and they got in this group, and one breeding bull. The cows are all pretty much bred. Oh, and we have one of our neighbor's cows in there too.
Oh, and one neighbor cow. Yeah.
We got them all in the corral, and we wondered, who are you? And it turns out,
Is that blue?
That's blue. We'll see
Blue.
if he wanders through the frame for us here, making his rounds. He's usually pretty aloof. Got cockleburs in him, a bunch of them.
Oh yeah.
Go on.